I was just binge watching some more. What the heck is that? Binge watching some more videos with Billy Carson, and he was, what's the name of it here? It's called "Did the Elites Suppress Anti-Gravity Technology?" Rant by Billy Carson. And it reminded me of a few things. Many years ago, I had come across a book by Paul A. LaViolette, PhD, who, and the book was called Secrets of Anti-Gravity Propulsion. And so what I'm going to do here is just give a basic overview of what he claims to have reverse engineered about how anti-gravity propulsion works. And there are several things that I heard listening to Billy Carson so far that reminded me of the technology that were very similar, just a slightly different way of explaining it. So it seems to me that he was on something, because what he was describing, and when I say he, I mean Paul A. LaViolette, what he was describing in the book Secrets of Anti-Gravity Propulsion. And Paul A. LaViolette is also the person who invented or created something called subquantum kinetics. And he also states that his subquantum kinetics is able to describe what's going on with his anti-gravity propulsion. Now, the interesting thing about the anti-gravity propulsion he talks about is that it's really not a form of propulsion. And this is something that's interesting, that in Billy Carson's rant that he was talking about, you know, he was kind of ragging on, you know, we got all this technology and we can do all this, but we're still using combustion engines and we're still exploding liquids, you know, to get rockets into space and stuff like that. And that's something that I've often thought about as well. It's really primitive, if you think about it. But you have to be given some leniency if you don't know about the different kind of technology that exist, you know. And I don't really, I mean, anti-gravity is a nice title to have, you know. That's why Paul A. LaViolette, I use that as a title of his book, Secrets of Anti-Gravity Propulsion. It's a good title. I mean, I wish I would have come up with a title like that. If I would have come up, but first I guess I would have to, you know, have a PhD in whatever he has. There's something, it's like, I think it was some chemical, I forget. I won't comment on Mr. LaViolette's education out. I looked it up before and I found it to be sufficient. I was a little disappointed, somewhat, you know, a little touched, saddened by, he died, I believe it was in 2023 or 2020, late 2022. I am going to post this video to Brendan Derer, who I've made friends with on Facebook. He, I think, worked closely with Paul A. LaViolette, and see what he has to say about my explanation about just a little bit about subquantum kinetics, but also about Paul A. LaViolette and his Secrets of Anti-Gravity Propulsion. So Billy Carson, in his rant, he was reading through different patents that were made for anti-gravity propulsion, and that's what I said earlier. When I was listening to those, it sounded familiar to me from what Paul A. LaViolette had described in his Secrets of Anti-Gravity Propulsion book. And I will have this, there's a link to the book on Amazon that's going to accompany this video. I'm also going to put a link to Billy Carson's video, which I just realized it was 3 months ago when he did that. The time and date that I'm making this recording is it's the 8th of June 2024, and it's 4:06 a.m. And so so that's 3 months ago. So some of the things that he was reading through the patents, some of the things rang true, some of the parts of his rant, you know, I can vibe with. He was talking about, you know, combustion and how it's, you know, antiquated. And so on that point, I'll segue into the descriptions of the anti-gravity propulsion described by Paul A. LaViolette in Secrets of Anti-Gravity Propulsion. And the first thing is that it's actually not a form of propulsion. Nothing's being propelled, right? So, and some of you may know, some of you may not know, but this is what Newton's third law of motion gives us for rocketry, for rocket propulsion, and also for the tires of cars on the ground. It's for every action there's an equal and opposite reaction. Most people know that, and that popular phrase. But what that actually means is for example, for a rocket ship, there's the liquid or solid state fuel, and it's ignited and it explodes, and it's focused through a nozzle, and that nozzle pushes those exploded gases downward. They hit the ground, and at a certain amount of force. So say if the ship is, I'm just going to use some very simple numbers here, but let's just say the ship is, you know, 100,000 pounds, right? The explosion will have to be a certain amount of force. So if you want to move it off the ground, it has to be 100,001 pounds if you want to move it a little bit. And the more force you can give downwards, it's going to have an equal and opposite reaction. It's going to push back against the rocket, and that's what gives it liftoff, right? So you have to have a net force, so much more than a rocket to get it, of course, to reach escape velocity. And so that's basically how propulsion works. Something is propelled out of a nozzle, and the equal and opposite reaction pushes back against the earth, pushes back against the ship, and that's what gives it the propulsion. The way the tires work on a car, for example, right? You have the car, the tire, let's say this hand right here is the road, this hand is the tire, and the tire starts to go this way, right? It's pushing against the ground, but since the earth is much heavier, just like with the rocket situation, which I didn't really mention that, it pushes against the ground, but the ground's not going anywhere, so the ground pushes back, and that propels the car forward. It's very similar. That's how propulsion works. Something's pushing against something, and it gets pushed back in the other direction. That's the equal and opposite reaction. That's propulsion. And that's how most things are working with rocketry and other forms of transportation. Airplanes, helicopters, it's the same thing, except their rotors, the propellers, create a force of wind that pushes down, and that pushes back up to get the craft to lift. The airfoils on the wings of airplanes are designed in such a way to aerodynamically create a high pressure system, and that's basically what the helicopter does. The rotors create a higher pressure of air underneath, so that above the helicopter is a lower pressure. It actually even is sucking the air through the blades and pushing them to the ground, so it's taking away some of the pressure that's above it and putting that down below it, and that's what gets the helicopter to become aloft, or to lift off. The airfoils on the wings on the airplane is, once they get up to a certain speed, it's pushing a bunch of that air underneath the wings and creating a higher pressure system, and that's propelling it off the ground. So it's the same scenario in all of those situations, is that something is pushing against. That's propulsion. Propulsion is a kind of pushing, basically. So, and a pushing back. So, and that's what propulsion is. I think I given enough examples there. I gave a rocket, right? Propellants being exploded. I gave a car tire, a helicopter propeller blades, and the aerodynamic, the airfoils on the wings, creating high pressure systems, right? So that is not what this anti-gravity propulsion as described in Secrets of Anti-Gravity Propulsion by Paul A. LaViolette. What reminded me of that, and what Billy Carson was reading in his rant about anti-gravity technique, he says it's called "Did the Elite Suppress Anti-Gravity Technology?" A rant by Billy Carson. Did the elite suppress it? So from all the documentation that Paul A. LaViolette provided in his book, it seems like a lot of it has been being suppressed. He's even sent letters to NASA that he has copies of them that were written back to him, and basically they ignored the guy. They were not having it, what he was talking about. So the things that I was listening to Billy Carson read from some of these patents is one of the things they said that, this is what really directly reminded me of what Paul LaViolette was describing in his reverse engineer technology. And by the way, I want to go, before I get into that, I know I'm kind of dragging it on a little bit, but I work off free association, and one of the things that's on the cover, because I talked about reverse engineering, and one of the images that's on the cover of his book, Secrets of Antigravity Propulsion, which I believe I actually have, I know I have 2 physical copies of it. One's in a storage in California, one's probably here, and I know I have on my tablet. I'll look that up and get that started. But on the cover of it, there is a picture of like one of the B12 or B-52 or whatever the heck that stealth bomber is. There's a picture of that on the cover of the book, and the reason is because that's one of the things that he reverse engineered as using some anti-gravity technology. Well, actually a part of it, and this is also what his subquantum kinetics also helps to partially explain. And it's something known as electrogravitics. Of course, when Billy Carson was talking about the anti-gravity technologies and the patents, a lot of them had to do with electricity. And so electrogravitics is one of the technologies that is specifically the kind of gravity manipulation. And see, that's another thing too. So one thing is that it's not a propulsion, and it's not even anti-gravity. One, it doesn't use propulsion, and 2, it's not anti-gravity, because I would say that it's gravity manipulation, and it's electrogravitics. There's also some technologies that were called magnetohydrodynamics, and so those are some different things there. Now so yeah, I think gravity manipulation is a more appropriate term, but again, like I said in the beginning, anti-gravity is, it's a term we like to hear. It sounds nice, anti-gravity. And what's interesting is, and now I would need to look this up, but I believe that Yusuf A. Salam, Harvey Weinberg, and maybe one other guy in 1972, they won a Nobel Prize for unifying electricity and magnetism with the strong nuclear force and the weak nuclear force. And I remember also seeing on a video with Brian Greene, is called The Elegant Universe. I believe that's it. It's all about string theory, where he was talking about that, and how, he talked about the process of how mathematically they wound back the cosmic clock, and they saw that the closer they got to the Big Bang, these forces were unified. So the closer they got to the Big Bang, the smaller things got, and the more intense electricity and magnetism folded into the weak nuclear force and the strong nuclear force, and they all became one. So they won a Nobel Prize for that. But gravity still, it's left out. But one of the things they were hypothesizing based on this is that if they continued to wind back the cosmic clock even further, then eventually gravity would be coupled with those forces, as they said that they were at the Big Bang. Now, the Big Bang is also, I'm saying, controversial, but it's also being refuted as well. So let's just say the Big Bang is not the end-all be-all. A lot of people, I don't also believe in just one Big Bang. Maybe there's a Big Bang as the origin of this universe, but not the origin of everything. or even this local part of the universe, right? Because now a lot of the evidence is coming out that some of the predictions that were made of a Big Bang, there are galaxies and stars that are, much bigger than they should be, or they're not the size they should be. So let me get back on track though with the technology here, the electrogravitics. And so why I brought up that piece of information that I had gleaned from The Elegant Universe, Brian Greene. I actually never read the book. I attempted to. Some things I'm much better at watching the video. Usually, mostly it's fantasy and science fiction, because most of my that's how I absorb or consume most science fiction and fantasy. But all nonfiction I get from books. Or not all of it, but that's how I like to consume nonfiction, is through books. For some reason, I absorb it. I just so much better. I learn much better reading a lot of things. I don't know what that is about me, but I do. And physical books, they always make my day. So the reason why I brought up the winding back of the cosmic clock and the unifying those forces and gravity being part of it is because I was also convinced, reading Secrets of Antigravity Propulsion by Paul A. LaViolette, that gravity is simply another aspect of electricity and magnetism. And I actually, I was listening somewhere before, and somebody said that we should, instead of calling it electromagnetism, it should be called magnetoelectricity, or yeah, something like that. Electromagnetism, magnetoelectrics. I don't know. Magnetoelectricity, magnetoelectrics. Oh my gosh, I forgot. I like that. I'm gonna use that. Magnetoelectrics. Anyway, it reminds me of magnetohydrodynamics. But so now that's another way to now go into the anti-gravity technology again, or anti-gravity propulsion, which again is not really propulsion and it's not anti-gravity. So now one of the technologies that Billy Carson was talking about in his rant about did the elites suppress anti-gravity technology was how one of the patents said that what it does is that it shrinks space in front of a vessel and expands it behind the vessel. Now that's interesting, because that is similar to what Paul A. LaViolette describes, but it's a little bit different. But it's so close, and when you hear what I'm saying, what I'm about to say about that, it really makes a lot of sense. Also, from science fiction, when I first heard the term in a Star Trek movie, the remakes of it, when Commander Sulu was, they were taking off. It was the first time they were taking off the Enterprise, and it wouldn't start. It's like, did you take off the parking brake? And kind of a little comedy relief moment. But I remember they used the term external inertial dampener, and that also made so much sense to me about what this technology is. It's a dampening. One of the things that it does is it dampens inertia. And so it dampens inertia in this way. So this electrogravitics, this anti-gravity propulsion, this technology that Paul A. LaViolette talks about in his book, it uses extremely high voltage going through capacitors that creates this effect. And in one of the things that he talks about is that if what it essentially does is, so what we know about gravity, right, is we mostly experience that, what we think of as an attractive force, right? But it would be more like it could look at, Einstein's space-time, right? How heavy objects warp the fabric of space and time, right? So if something really like this is flat space, right, and a heavy object warps it, and it kind of makes a cup, right? Or what would be like a well. So what we mostly experience as gravity, things, if somebody's walking around a flat ground and they fall into a well, right? So that's a gravity well is what we most experience. But what Paul A. LaViolette talked about is that through electrogravitics, you make use of that by using these extremely high voltage capacitors. On the front of the vehicle, you would create a gravity well, which I just described, right? So it's like as if there was a massive object in front of the vehicle, so that the vehicle would constantly be falling into it. But that alone wouldn't be all you need, because then you would still have inertia, because it would be like being pulled really hard, right? And you still have inertia, the inertial force is there. Now, what he talks about is that you create an equally a gravity hill. So a hill, right? Like imagine a hill growing out of the ground, right? Imagine a hill growing out of the ground. So if you were standing on the flat ground and a hill formed, it would push you up, right? Like imagine tectonic plates coming together, right? Two giant pieces of landmass, and that's how mountains form, right? They push up, or a hill, right? So imagine that hill, if you're standing on it, the hill. So that's a gravity hill. So now we have an opposite pole, if you will, or an opposite form of gravity, the gravity hill. So if you have a gravity well, let's just give it a unit. If you have a gravity well of 1 unit, you must create a gravity hill of an equal strength on the other side of the craft, so that the vehicle, the vessel, is being pushed. It's being pushed. What am I doing here? It's being pushed and pulled at the same time with the same force from the front and back, and then in a gradient up to the center, the forces are equally spreading out so that they cancel out by the middle, so that there's an equal force in the back as in the front, so that the occupants in it, and Billy Carson described this as you're inside of a bubble. The vessel basically becomes a bubble in which inertia and the forces of gravity are canceled out. So, in a car, we all know this, that if you hit the gas really hard, it'll push you back. That's inertia, because according to Newton's first law of motion, an object in rest must stay at rest, and an object in motion will stay in motion unless it's acted upon by an outside force. So the outside force of this car moving forward, we want to stay at rest, but boom, we get pushed back into the seat, and then the seat pushes against us and moves us forward with the car. Same thing if we're going at a certain speed, we hit the brakes really hard, we want to still go, and the object in motion wants to still go, and so we lurch forward. What this electrogravitic system does, this anti-gravity propulsion, is it cancels that out. So, and this is one of the reasons why if these different UFOs, these unidentified flying objects, or UAPs, unidentified aerial phenomena, if they're using something like this, it must cancel out the gravity and inertia so that they can make these sudden maneuvers that they're doing, right? These wild and crazy moves that are being seen by them all the time, right? So, because that's why this is what people talk about when they say that, oh, those things are making impossible maneuvers, because it would have very detrimental, harmful effects on the human body. It would basically crush and liquefy the human body if it's moving. First of all, the speed that it's moving, and then if it's stopping so quickly, right? It doesn't matter what kind of harness you have on. If you're in something, and you just stop all of a sudden, you're like, right? You'll have your body will get bruised and damaged, but the speed, the G-force, right, which is the gravitational force, if too much of that is hitting your body at one time, it'll just crush you into a paste. So that's why the inertia has to be canceled out with these electrogravitic means. Now, with these extremely high voltage capacitors are used to do this. What was found is that the way to do this is that you electrify the vehicle, the vessel, in such a way whereas you accumulate an extremely high amount of positive charges in front of the vehicle, and that's how you create gravity wells. And I can go into that a little bit later too, which is interesting. This is why it's electrogravitics, and why it's been hypothesized that gravity is simply another phenomena of electricity and magnetism. So you create a much super high concentration of positive charges, positrons, on the front, and that's what creates the gravity well that pulls the vehicle. And on the back of the vehicle, you create an extremely high concentration of negative charge, electrons, and that's what pushes. Now, one of the things this brings to mind right now is that we know that the reason why I can, I can't push my fingers, like, what was that Slipknot song? Oh gosh, I push my fingers into my eyes, it's the only way. Okay, sorry, I had a Slipknot moment. The reason why we cannot push our other hand through one hand, or the pen, this wonderful pen, through my hand, is because of the electrons, right? It's the repulsing forces. Electrons are negative, so negative and negative repel each other, right? That's why we can't. That's one of the things that we hear about, is why we don't go through solid objects, right? Because of the electron, the outer electron shells of those solid objects, right? There's not enough space between them to go through. That's a form of repulsion. So that's why when you create an extremely high concentration behind the vehicle, it'll push. And there's an extremely high concentration of positrons, right, or positive charge in the front of the vehicle, it'll pull. It's an attraction. It's an electromagnetic attraction, or magneto-electric attraction, right? So that is part of how electrogravitics is working. Now, I could go, I'll go a little bit into this, but I don't want to get too far off. But the reason why this is said to work, and why it's hypothesized that gravity is another aspect of magnetoelectric or electromagnetism, is because it's been shown that protons, right, which are in the nucleus of atoms, right, have a slightly negligible, almost unnoticeable on the single subatomic particle scale, a slightly higher positive charge than the electron has a negative charge, meaning it's not a 1-for-1. It doesn't exactly cancel out. A positron, which is the exact opposite in mass and charge of an electron, when a positron and an electron meet, they annihilate and release energy and photons and other subatomic particles, right? So they're complete opposites. The positron is the antiparticle of the electron. They're the exact same size and mass and charge opposites, right? The exact shape, charge opposites. It's -1, +1. Whereas the electron might be a -1, the proton is a +1.000 something. It has a slightly higher positive charge. It's not the exact opposite. It's not -1 and +1. It's a proton. No. And plus, of course, we know that the proton is composed of quarks, which have 1/3 charges of the electron, but not quite. Like, for example, a proton, it has what's called up quarks and down quarks. It's a special kind of quarks. There are also charm quarks and strange quarks, but those are not the ones that are making up the regular matter. So just for this, and they have thirds of charges. So a little bit of quick math. I apologize, I'm doing this to you, but I sometimes geek out and I can't help myself. It's like a freaking addiction I have. But the quarks inside that make up a proton, for example, there are 2 up quarks and 1 down quark, and each up quark has 2/3 of a charge. So since there are 2 up quarks, which 2/3 charge, 2/3 plus 2/3 is 4/3, 4/3. But then you have 1 down quark, which has the charge of a -1/3. So 2/3 and 2/3, which is 4/3, minus 1/3 makes it 3/3, right? Which is 1, a +1. And that's why a proton has a +1 charge. Whereas the neutron has 2 down quarks and 1 up quark. So 2 down quarks. is negative 1/3 and negative 1/3, which equals negative 2/3, and then you have one up quark, which is positive 2/3. So negative 2/3 and positive 2/3 cancels each other out, and that's why you have a neutral and a neutron. Apologize if I went too off the track there, but that's the quarks, and that's what they make up. So, and then, you know, and then the protons and the neutrons in the nucleus of the atom, if there is, you know, neutrons there, like the hydrogen atom only has one proton, and they don't have other neutrons unless in certain, okay, isotopes. Like there's protium, there's deuterium, there's tritium. All right, anyway, but they're held together by the strong nuclear force, which some have said the brothers of the photon are the gluons. They work at a very short range, usually the size of the nucleus of atoms, and that's what holds together the proton and neutron together, is this interaction of these gluons. Very, I know, very creative name. It glues them together. Let's call them gluons. So, and that's what, when you're able to break those apart, it really, but there's a lot of energy gets released, atomic explosions, all that stuff like that. But back to what this has to do with electrogravitics, right? So one of the reasons this works is what's actually happening when you create a super high concentration of a positive charge, and to make that well, what's actually happening is those electrons are being attracted to it, and the gravity hill is a super high concentration of electrons, or negative charge is pushing. It's a super high repulsive force. Now, one of the reasons why gravity is so weak, right, in comparison, is still an aspect of electromagnetism. Now, I'm going to send this video to Mr. Brandon Darrer. Hopefully I can get a comment from him. I'll send him a message why. But is because there is, even though everything's made of atoms, all matter has electrons on the outside of it, there's still a slightly higher positive charge being, especially in the conglomeration, when you have super aggregates of all different atoms together. Now that slightly negligible positive charge that's on those protons, which is slightly more than the electrons, it starts to show, and that's what gives, when you have giant matter like a planet, then that slightly higher charge starts to build up, and it pulls objects towards it. So it's not actually a warping of space-time. It's a net attractive, electromagnetic attractive force. And so I know, think about that for a little bit, but that's the basics of electrogravitics according to Paul LaViolette in Secrets of Antigravity Propulsion. And you know, he has an etheron explanation of different etheron interactions, which goes to subquantum kinetics, which shows how this works. He also has plenty of examples in his book about gravitators and gravity pulse beams and all these other things, and people who've used gravity in this way in experiments in laboratories. One of the things that Billy Carson mentions in his rant about the elites suppressing anti-gravity technology is the Manhattan experiment, or the Philadelphia experiment, sorry, the Manhattan Project was the nuclear bomb, the Philadelphia experiment, and that's mentioned in Paul LaViolette. He also mentions, of course, Nikola Tesla, T. Townsend Brown, and several other companies and things like that were working with this technology. So in summary, I just talked about Secrets of Antigravity Propulsion, which is a great book by Paul LaViolette. The link will be here to that book. Also, the link to Billy Carson's rant on anti-gravity will be there. And then I'll probably have I'll put a link in there to my worldreadingclub.com. But that's it. I'm watching a lot of Billy Carson's material. I'm really inspired by him. I like that he is very open and saying, you know, everybody's not going to agree about everything all the time. It's impossible. You know, I don't agree with everything he says. I think that some of the stuff about, you know, with his explanations about the grandfather paradox and time travel, and also with, you know, that quantum mechanics shows us a creator. I don't know if I've fully understood him yet. Maybe that's why I have some discordance with that, but I have a different idea about the creator. You can see my video where I talk about nonsense ideas about we need to first understand the concept of eternity, and that I believe that we as human beings can understand certain things. I wrote some notes somewhere. Actually, let me see if they come up really quickly. Oh, there was something I was going to pull up on here. Oh, the cover of Paul A. LaViolette's book that had the picture of the stealth bomber. Oh, I didn't get into that. That's maybe I can go into that and talk about that, about why he reverse engineered one of the things that he talked about in that book. So anyway, let me just get into that real quick. Basically, the stealth bomber, one of the reasons why it's so quiet and so fast is because it has no drag, because the wings are electrified in a certain way, where they have a high concentration of positive charges. And so, or maybe it's got to be negative. Anyway, either way, what happens is that the wing, it's electrified in such a way, it's got to be the excessive electrical charge is that it pushes the air and the other, which is made of nitrogen and oxygen, all the other molecules and everything out of the way, so that it significantly reduces the drag. And because it significantly reduces the drag, it aerodynamically makes it so that it uses less energy, and so it can go faster with its propulsion system. And also, when there's no wind drag, it's less noise. We all know about that noise that happens if you're driving your car with your window open, and if I turn on the air in here again, you hear that it's the wind noise. So a lot of the wind noise gets taken away from that. So that's what I wanted to talk about there. Do I have even my freaking app here with all that stuff? I mean, it's not really that important for me to show that book, but I do have it here. And so let me just think, is there... Oh yeah, I have a lot. I mean, he's got a lot of really great books. BNN Nook suggested networks device may connect automatically. Not right now. So I have actually a few of his books. He's got some really great books. There's Genesis of the Cosmos, right there. There's Earth Under Fire, and then Genesis of the Cosmos, Earth Under Fire. Let me see. Look at my library. Genesis of the Cosmos, Earth Under Fire. Oh, Decoding the Message of the Pulsars. That's a good one. Where's my Secrets of Antigravity Propulsion? No. All right. What is happening here right now? Okay. This thing is opened up to curate your content. Not now. I want to go back to my library. Why is Secrets of Antigravity Propulsion not here again? Where are my books? This is definitely not all the books that I have. All titles, okay. Fascinating. All right, well, it's not there. I'll have to find it, but he's got some really great books. I don't know why it's not here. Anti-gravity. Why is it not showing up? Interesting. Well, I mean, I found it though when I looked it up. There it goes, and there's the stealth bomber on the front of it, and that's his book. But that's so weird. Why would it say that I don't Matching results in store. Oh, cool. Nick Redfern has a book called How Anti-Gravity Built the Pyramids. I've seen that one before. But that's crazy. I bought the book from Paul A. LaViolette. I don't know why I don't have it in my library. Okay. Well, that's it. Anti-Gravity Propulsion. Like I said, I was binge watching some Billy Carson as I was driving and doing some research. Often when I drive, I do a lot of driving, and I like to listen to podcasts, and that's my thing. So it's 4:42 in the morning. I've been on here for 40 minutes and almost 41 minutes. I don't know if there's anything else I need to wrap up about that anti-gravity propulsion. I may have left some things out, but that's okay. I didn't make any notes or really plan or prepare. I just got inspired, and I feel like I need to continue to put out my ideas and the content and the things that I'm inspired by. And Billy Carson is definitely, he's helped unlock something. I did a couple of videos. It was called Billy Carson Forbidden Knowledge Unlocks Orgasms of the Gods. You got to check that out. I'm going to expand on that some more because it's really, really amazing. Also, the of the gods thing there. Okay, well, I got this because I started reading more of Eric von Daniken. He is really a pioneer in the whole ancient astronaut stuff. Even the TV show Ancient Astronauts was inspired by his books. And a lot of his books has this title with of the gods, right? So War of the Gods, right? So I'm definitely going to see how I can flesh out Orgasms of the Gods into a book, even if it's a short one. And then there's one that I'm definitely going to be doing called Sympathy of the Gods. And that has to do with the sympathetic and parasympathetic nervous system and Mahamudra. So Tantric Mahamudra meditation, and how the monks in the Himalayas use this Tantric Mahamudra meditation to activate their sympathetic nervous system so that they can raise their body temperature so that they can actually melt ice. And it's also something that, man, I intuitively knew without even reading the book. It was called Becoming the Compassion Buddha, Avalokiteshvara. Oh my goodness, there's some really cool stuff out there, but that's it. I'm gonna, the links and everything that will be in the description of this video here on YouTube. So a lot of good stuff. I mean, I'm seeing some people come out these days, and there's a lot of really good things happening. Yeah, so I was saying, I like that. I'm gonna wrap this up with, I like that Billy Carson is one of the more open-minded people I've heard. He understands that not everybody's gonna agree. Like I don't agree with some of the things that he says, but I'm learning so much from him, and he's helped me to unlock. Like after I've been watching his stuff, it really it put me on that. When I realized that Orgasms of the Gods article that I published, it was March 3rd of 2014, and then some other ones that I did about Area 51, and then the things that he's been talking about, and it just makes us connect. It's why, oh man, the band I Am Abomination, their album Passion of the Heist and Passion of the Heist 2, guys, this stuff. I'm gonna end with the quote from that song, man. The song called Greetings from Easter Island says, God died when the churches rise. He was born when the ancient astronauts arrived. The heavens exist and our maker is there. Death is not the way to visit. Technology is our only prayer. That's right. Technology is our only prayer.